Lily spent 80 years loving a man who never chose her. She followed him across oceans, buried her dreams, raised his child alone, and even held his hand as he died, only to watch him cling to another woman's photo until his last breath. So when Lily opened her eyes one morning and found herself decades in the past, with 2 weeks left before the flight that ruined her life, she didn't cry this time. She went straight to the ticket counter, slid the ticket across the desk, and said with a calm smile, "Refund it. What doesn't belong to me? I won't chase anymore." And that's where her story truly begins. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to return the ticket? Tickets are hard to come by now, and you might not be able to book another," the ticket clerk kindly reminded me. I smiled brightly. "Even if it's hard to get, I don't want it. What doesn't belong to me will always be a futile longing." "All right, here's your refund and receipt," the clerk said, handing me the thin ticket. I took it, turning it over in my hands, examining it for a while. Then I picked up the heart-shaped necklace hanging from my chest, opened the locket, and revealed a black and white photo of Ethan Walker. He was a young man in a suit, his face slightly turned to the side. His hair was neatly combed back, his nose high and straight, and his deep-set eyes full of charisma and confidence. In my past life there were so many things I couldn't understand. I didn't understand why the boy who once shyly bandaged my sprained ankle, his eyes brimming with emotion, would later on our wedding night leave me alone in the bridal chamber. He had looked at me coldly and said, "Lily, I could never share a bed with a woman from the Bennett family." I didn't understand why the boy who had once carried a necklace with my photo close to his heart during his studies in Lionwood would later, when leaving for his diplomatic post in France, coldly tell me, "Lily, even if you cry your eyes blind, I won't take you with me." Later I came to understand. As he had said, a pampered daughter from a wealthy family like me, who knew nothing but embroidery, was nothing more than a relic of a feudal past. I didn't blame him. I blamed myself. So I sold the embroidery studio my parents had left me and followed him to a distant land. He spent his days discussing politics with high-ranking officials and never allowed me to step into the guest room. I tried to adapt. I learned modern fashion, unbound my feet despite the excruciating pain, and even learned to dance. But when I finally appeared at one of his diplomatic receptions, I saw him holding another woman's waist, dancing one song after another. The tenderness in his eyes was something I hadn't seen in years. When someone asked who I was, he coolly replied, "She's my cousin." That woman, however, was Sophia Brooks, the daughter of a prominent family and a protocol officer at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His secretaries whispered about how the aloof diplomat had reunited with his first love. Meanwhile, the person who shared his nights passionately and intimately was me, the so-called cousin. One day I touched my belly and smiled gently. "Ethan, we're going to have a child." I thought he would finally see me as his wife. Instead he froze, the pen in his hand trembling. After a long pause he said coldly, "Get an abortion." "It could kill me," I replied stubbornly. He sneered. "Plenty of people die in plane crashes. Does that mean they stop flying?" I clutched my stomach, feeling frozen to the core. I refused to say another word. After a long silence he spoke softly. "Your parents wrote to me. They miss you, Lily. Go back and take care of them for me." To protect my child, and clinging to the faint hope that being a good wife and mother might earn his respect, I returned to my family's home. I took care of my parents and raised my child. When the war broke out, I led my family from place to place, surviving by picking up embroidery again. My fingers were pricked and bloodied by needles. But one day I saw a newspaper featuring Ethan. He was standing proudly giving an interview, with Sophia Brooks holding his arm and smiling radiantly. Below the photo, the caption read, "Diplomat Ethan Walker and wife." Later, Ethan returned to the country briefly, claiming he was worried about my parents. By then, Sophia Brooks had died in a bombing in Paris. When the news reached him, he looked as though he'd been struck by lightning and collapsed into a chair. From then on, for decades, he gave me nothing but cold indifference, not even acknowledging our child. When he fell gravely ill in his later years, I, now an old woman in my 80s, took care of him personally, staying by his side until the very end. But even on his deathbed, the necklace he clutched tightly didn't hold my picture. It was Sophia Brooks, the woman who had died in her prime, forever preserved as his one and only love. I had worked tirelessly my entire life, loving him deeply. Yet I wasn't even worth a single word in his will. Thankfully, there were still 2 weeks left before the flight. There was time to set things right. I discarded the photo and folded the refunded ticket receipt, replacing the photo in the locket with it. Then I returned to the house Ethan and I had shared. I informed the old housekeeper. The embroidery workshop is not for sale anymore. Prepare a full embroidery setup for me. 7 years ago, a devastating fire took my parents' lives and crippled the Walker family's 300-year-old embroidery legacy. In my previous life, a prominent nobleman, Mr. Adrian Knight, had sought the finest craftsmanship for a custom suit themed after Farewell My Concubine. He visited every embroidery house in search of the best artisans. Back then, I had given up the opportunity because I was accompanying Ethan overseas. Now, however, if I could win Mr. Knight's favor, it would be a crucial turning point for the dormant workshop. The sound of a car horn echoed outside. Looking up, I saw Ethan walking into the house. He wore a shirt layered with a cashmere vest, and his perfectly tailored trousers accentuated his long legs. His sharp features radiated charm, and the faint smile on his lips added a touch of warmth. Sophia Brooks clung to his arm, dressed in an exquisite lace dress. She giggled playfully, her fair complexion tinged with a hint of pink from the wine. "Ethan, I didn't get to dance enough at the gala. Won't you dance with me a little more?" she said, holding his hand as she spun gracefully into his arms. Her laughter rang out as they crossed the threshold. When they saw me, they froze mid-step. I too was momentarily stunned. In my past life, I had locked myself away to study French and had no idea they had been so close all along. Setting aside my embroidery, I stood and prepared to leave, but Sophia blocked my way, smiling coyly. "Ethan, who is this?" Ethan's expression darkened, his tall nose casting a sharp shadow over his face. "She's my cousin," he said curtly. Before he could elaborate, I spoke up myself. Ethan looked momentarily surprised but quickly masked it, giving a low, nonchalant hum. Sophia wasn't done with me yet. She tugged at my sleeve, covering her mouth as she laughed. "This is the cousin you're bringing to the French Quarter? Aren't you afraid she'll end up being displayed in the Louvre?" She mocked my blue and white embroidered outfit as if it were some relic of the past. Brushing off her hand, I stayed silent. But then she pointed at the hem of my skirt and exclaimed in horror, as though she'd seen a rat. "Oh my God! Does your family still bind feet? Doesn't it stink?" Ethan placed a protective arm around her shoulder and guided her forward. "Don't pull at her. You'll dirty your hands," he said coolly. I paused mid-step. They thought speaking in French would shield their mockery from me, but their disdainful glances and superior attitudes were unmistakable. Even if I hadn't studied French in my previous life, their meaning would have been painfully clear. That evening, Ethan came to my room carrying a bouquet of lilies. Without a word, he placed them in the vase on the table. Seeing me quietly sewing at the embroidery frame, he sat down uninvited. "Lily," he said coldly, "these flowers are for you. I'm glad you understand your place. The only reason I agreed to bring you to France was because you threatened me with your life. Don't harbor any further delusions." I didn't even look up. "Are you finished?" I asked calmly. "Yes." "Then please leave." As I spoke, he suddenly grabbed my wrist, his gaze falling on the embroidery needle in my fingers. His brows furrowed deeply. "Why are you still embroidering? You were going to sell the workshop. Why not spend the time learning more French? Even as my cousin, don't embarrass me." The cloying scent of a woman's perfume lingered on him, making my nose itch. I replied lightly, "Understood." My unusually compliant response caught him off guard. His expression softened slightly. "Tomorrow, go to the Anha Mall and buy yourself some clothes and jewelry," he said, his tone almost gentle. "I'll cover all the costs. You can't possibly go to France looking so outdated and tacky, can you?" I looked down at the blue and white embroidered skirt I was wearing. My mother had painstakingly stitched it by hand, each thread delicate and elegant. But that's just how people are. When someone doesn't love you, even if you're wearing a wedding dress, it's all wrong. I responded quietly and indifferently, "All right." After Ethan left, I opened the locket around my neck. The refund receipt was still there, and the departure date was only 14 days away. I told myself to endure it. I didn't want to stir up any trouble before the flight. If my uncle and aunt objected, they might drag Ethan into a long discussion. If they tried to stop him from leaving for France, things would get even more complicated. Over the next few days, I focused on designing a phoenix embroidery pattern. Once it was complete, I hurried to purchase fabric. I hadn't expected to run into Ethan and his group in the bustling market. A group of young men, all dressed in Western-style clothing, were gathered around him. Tall and striking, Ethan stood out like a crane among chickens. "Lily, we're going to take a group photo. Join us." Sophia stepped forward and grabbed my hand enthusiastically. "She doesn't like pointless things like this." "Don't call her," Ethan said. His smile reserved but his gaze sharp with warning as it landed on me. I understood he didn't want me there, just as he hadn't wanted me in the drawing room during those diplomatic gatherings. Sophia, however, merely laughed and tugged me along. I couldn't understand why a group of diplomats with nothing better to do needed to drag me into their commemorative photo. It wasn't until Sophia leaned close and whispered in my ear. A parasite clinging to Ethan, refusing to divorce him and insisting on following him to France. "Do you have no self-awareness? Don't worry, I'll help you find some." I turned to look at her radiant smile, momentarily at a loss for words. At the photo studio, Sophia dragged Ethan into the shot against the bright red backdrop. He stood in his black suit while she wore a fitted black dress. The two looked perfectly matched. The others in the group cheered, joking, "It looks just like a wedding photo." A diplomat and a protocol officer, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs couldn't ask for a more fitting pair. The photographer chuckled and directed them, "Sir, lean closer to the lady." "Closer?" "Yes, just like that." I stood to the side, dazed. So the photo Ethan had placed in his locket in my past life had been taken here. He had turned his heart to someone else long before I ever realized it. Ethan's refined features swept over the group as he said calmly, "Stop teasing. You'll make Sophia uncomfortable." With that, he discreetly tucked a stray strand of her hair back into place. Sophia turned to me, her smile sweet as honey. "Lily, don't you think Ethan and I make a perfect match?" Ethan narrowed his eyes, a silent warning in his gaze. My mind flashed back to our wedding night, how I had been filled with joy, thinking we had finally become husband and wife, only to spend the night alone in the cold, suffocating silence of that festive room. I forced a smile and said the two words she wanted to hear. "You do." In my past life I had clung stubbornly to the childhood memories of our bond, refusing to let go. How laughable I had been. I gripped the locket around my neck tightly. Only 10 days remained. Just 10 more days and I could leave all of this behind. The camera clicked, capturing that moment. I turned and left. From then on, I slept only 2 or 3 hours a night, working tirelessly in front of the embroidery frame. My fingers danced over the fabric even as the needle pricked my skin, drawing blood. I refused to stop. One evening I took a break and went to see a play by Adrian Knight. I had always been an opera enthusiast and had spent a hefty sum to secure a front row seat. The lead actress on stage had striking features and a captivating voice, her movements graceful and alluring. In the end, she slashed her throat with a dagger and collapsed, her vibrant phoenix-like eyes closing as she fell. My heart trembled violently. In my past life, during the chaos of war, someone had collapsed in front of me just like that. Blood flowed from their chest, yet they still smiled, dazzling and bright. I owed your father my life. Returning it now is simply karma. As I stepped down from the carriage and looked up at the second floor of the house, I noticed the light in my room was on. Something felt wrong. Panicked, I rushed upstairs. The door to my room was wide open, and clothes along with the contents of my vanity were strewn all over the floor. Sophia was holding a pair of 3-inch embroidered shoes with a look of disdain, casually tossing them aside. "What are you doing?" I demanded, shoving her forcefully. My entire body trembled with rage. She stumbled into the edge of the table, clutching the back of her head as she stood up, her face full of disbelief. "How dare you push me? How dare you?" She grabbed a vase and hurled it toward my head. Ethan appeared at the doorway. "Sophia, what's going on?" With tears in her reddened eyes, Sophia turned to him. "Look at this, Ethan. I picked out so many clothes and jewelry for your cousin, and I even helped her tidy up all this junk. She had the nerve to push me." It was only then that I noticed the pile of shopping bags in the corner. Ethan's voice was icy as he addressed me. Lily, you're the one insisting on going to France with us. You can't even dress properly, and someone is kind enough to help you. Yet you repay them by acting out. I lowered my gaze to my damp, rumpled clothes, clutching the wound on my forehead as I replied coldly. Who asked for her help? And this isn't junk. I pointed at the hairpin that had been tossed to the floor. This hairpin, I paused, my voice catching slightly, was a gift from Ethan when he was 15. But it seemed unimportant now. He didn't care about the things I cherished lying discarded across the floor. He didn't notice the swelling on my forehead or the disarray I had been thrown into. What use was there in saying anything? Taking a deep breath, I declared firmly, I'll accept your gifts. But Sophia, from now on, please don't enter my room without permission. Sophia refused to back down. Ethan, I tried to help her out of kindness and I get treated like this? She can't even apologize. She pointed at the necklace hanging around my neck. After all I've given her, is asking for an old necklace too much? In that moment I understood why she had so generously showered me with gifts. She must have known the significance of the necklace and wanted to take it from me deliberately. I gripped the necklace tightly, refusing to let go. No, this was the one thing I couldn't give up. To me it symbolized a new beginning. Ethan stepped forward, his tall frame imposing as he leaned in, boxing me into the small space. Lily, this is the one thing you can't keep clinging to. I shook my head. It has nothing to do with you. He let out a mocking laugh. Then, handing over as he reached for the necklace, I said softly, Ethan, what would your parents think if they knew about this? He froze, his hand stopping midair. A flicker of disgust passed through his eyes. All you ever do is use them to threaten me. Does it amuse you? I exhaled deeply. As they both left the room, I immediately asked the housekeeper for a key and locked the door securely. Thankfully, the embroidery material hadn't been damaged. I steadied my nerves and focused on my work. There were only 5 days left. The day Ethan was set to leave coincided with Adrian Knight's visit to select the embroidered piece. On the 4th day before Ethan's departure, it was the anniversary of my parents' death. That night my sleep was restless, plagued by nightmares of my past life. When I awoke early the next morning, my head throbbed and my entire body burned with fever. Where has the young master gone? I asked the housekeeper, needing to know where Ethan was. The housekeeper hesitated before answering. The young master didn't return last night. I nodded. He usually accompanied me to honor this anniversary. If he wasn't going, so be it. My head was pounding and I fell back into bed, quickly drifting off again. Half asleep, I vaguely heard someone enter the room. Ethan, kiss me. Don't stay here, come to my room. Why isn't she gone yet? I know that woman is your wife, isn't she? Ethan, who do you want, her or me? By the doorway, Ethan had Sophia Brooks pressed against the wall, his hands cupping her face as he kissed her. It was a kiss filled with mockery and unclear intent. What do you think, my dear Sophia? He whispered. I married her only because her father saved my mother from a fire. Do you really think I willingly married a footbound woman, who can't even recognize the entire alphabet? Sophia wrapped her arms around his waist, her slender shoulders marked with faint traces of kisses. She teased, her voice syrupy sweet. Then hurry up. I was so drunk last night, I can hardly remember anything. While she's off paying respects at the graves, we can have some real fun. I was in no mood to witness their private drama. Clearing my throat loudly, I made my presence known. At the same time, the housekeeper knocked on the door. Ma'am, the medicine is ready. You should have some to feel better. Their faces were filled with embarrassment. I ignored them, walked to the door, and took the medicine from the housekeeper. Ethan glanced at me. You're sick, he asked. I sipped the bitter medicine, my face twisting from the taste. You two, please leave. You're dirtying my sight. Ethan took a step toward me, but Sophia grabbed his sleeve, her lips trembling as she pouted. Ethan, I'm not feeling well either. I drank too much last night and still feel dizzy. He immediately placed his hand on her forehead, checking her temperature. Relaxing slightly, he said, I'll take you to the guest room to rest. The two of them left together. It was a long time before Ethan returned alone. He coughed lightly into his hand and said, Sophia is a guest here. What exactly did you hear? I was holding a silver embroidery needle and answered indifferently. I woke up when the housekeeper came in. Did something happen? Relieved, he leaned closer, reaching out to touch my forehead. When did you get sick? Why didn't you say anything? I stepped back, avoiding his touch. Cousin, there's no need. His hand paused midair before he withdrew it, his face darkening. Without another word, he turned and left. Feeling slightly better, I called for the driver and went alone to visit my parents' graves. Ethan didn't deserve to appear before them. The next day, I overheard Sophia arguing with the housekeeper. Ethan allowed me to handle this. Why are you stopping me? She demanded. The housekeeper, wiping sweat from his brow, explained nervously. The finances of this household have always been managed by Miss Lily. I stepped in and asked what was happening. It turned out Sophia was planning a farewell banquet to celebrate Ethan's upcoming diplomatic appointment in France. If my cousin has already approved it, I said, then naturally Miss Sophia may use the funds. Sophia gave a triumphant smile, snapping her fan against her palm. Whoever Ethan loves is the true mistress of this house. With that, she sauntered off. The housekeeper looked at me, his expression uneasy. Miss Lily, this isn't proper. Miss Sophia is an outsider. You are Ethan's wife by arrangement. I smiled faintly, unaffected. The next day, I finally understood why Ethan had fallen for Sophia. She was everything I wasn't. Sophia, raised in the elegance of Western high society, was a spoiled heiress who had always been handed whatever she desired. Her arrogance wasn't unjustified. It came from a life where everything naturally bent to her will. At the same time, she embodied the kind of wife Ethan had always envisioned. Charming, refined, and worldly. Within a single day, the living room had been transformed. Elegant Western oil paintings adorned the walls, gold-trimmed tableware gleamed on the dining table, and a champagne tower made of crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Ethan sat at the head of the room, dressed in a tailored wool suit he had carefully chosen. Though his brilliance was only beginning to show, his promising future already attracted the attention of government officials. His composed demeanor and sharp brows framed eyes that burned with ambition. Meanwhile, Sophia, wearing a soft white satin evening gown, carried herself with grace and poise, welcoming and entertaining guests like the mistress of the house. By the time the housekeeper recounted these events to me, it was the following day. I was in my room packing my belongings. The housekeeper, his face wrinkled with worry, tried to persuade me. Miss Lily, just speak softly to the young master. In the past, whenever you cried, he would always come to comfort you. If that doesn't work, you could speak to your grandfather and grandmother. No matter how many years have passed, the young master is now someone destined for greatness. You shouldn't let go so easily. I knew the housekeeper had watched us grow up and genuinely cared about me. But 60 years of my previous life had taught me otherwise. I replied quietly. A heart that has changed is like sand slipping through your fingers. You can't hold on to it. At that moment, Ethan pushed the door open and entered. You don't need to bring too much luggage, he said, glancing at me. You can buy whatever you need when we get there. He seemed to be in a good mood. His brows relaxed as he walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a beginner's French textbook. How's your studying? Have you learned how to greet someone yet? I looked at him confused. Ethan had a natural talent for languages and was fluent in several. When he was in church school, the principal had praised him as the most outstanding student in the school's history. In my past life, I had once begged him to teach me French. Not only had he refused, but he had also mocked me for asking. Pulling myself from the memory, I recited a few basic polite phrases to avoid arousing suspicion. Ethan nodded. Since you insist on coming with me, you might as well put in some effort. His gaze briefly rested on the embroidery frame in the corner, but he said nothing. The day before we were set to leave, I visited the site of the old embroidery workshop that had burned down years ago. The spring chill lingered in the air, and the drizzle felt cold as it fell. Holding an oiled paper umbrella, I stood quietly staring at the overgrown plot of land. Scenes from the past flashed through my mind, 7-year-old me hiding under the embroidery frame with Ethan sneaking sweets to me, my mother pressing me down in front of the frame, warning me that I wouldn't eat until I finished my work, My father holding me in his arms, showing me newly arrived fabrics and asking if I liked any of them. The coachman standing nearby gently reminded me, "Miss Lily, this place isn't lucky. We should leave. I've heard it used to be a renowned embroidery workshop before the fire. So many people died here. Staying too long might bring bad luck." I wiped away the tears at the corners of my eyes and silently promised, "Father, Mother, this time I won't leave. I'll stay here to protect this place." Then I turned to the coachman. "Let's go." When the carriage arrived at the housekeeper came out to greet me with an umbrella, his expression anxious. "Ma'am." I interrupted him as I stepped over the threshold, lifting my skirt. "Housekeeper, you've addressed me incorrectly again." But as soon as I looked up, my pupils constricted in shock. On the table in the main hall, my embroidery piece lay in shreds. It had been cut to pieces. Sophia stood there holding a pair of scissors. She was snipping away at the long slender neck of the embroidered phoenix. The blood rushed to my head, and I grabbed my skirt as I ran forward. My small bound feet twisted and I fell hard to the ground. Sophia acted as if she didn't see me, continuing to cut the stitching. I turned to Ethan, who was calmly seated on the sofa reading a newspaper. Sophia held up a piece of the torn embroidery and said playfully, "Ethan, let's use this to make a handbag. I really like it." I scrambled to my feet, lunged forward and smacked the scissors out of her hand. Snatching the shredded phoenix head, I clutched it to my chest. "What are you doing? Why do you insist on destroying someone else's things?" My tears streamed uncontrollably as I looked at the scattered remains of the embroidery on the floor. Sophia stepped back, pouting as she said dismissively, "It's just a piece of fabric. There are plenty more at the market." I glared at her with all the anger I could muster, then marched toward Ethan, ripping the newspaper out of his hands. "Why didn't you stop her?" I shouted. "She doesn't understand, but you do, don't you?" Ethan removed his glasses slowly and began cleaning them with a deliberate calmness. He lifted his eyes, his expression indifferent. "I'm leaving for France tomorrow. None of this matters." I trembled from head to toe. The childhood friend who had once been thrilled to receive a simple embroidered handkerchief was now a stranger to me. He had unlocked the door to my room and allowed others to trample over the things I held dear. Raising my hand, I slapped him hard across the face, each word firm and full of heartbreak. "Ethan, I no longer matter to you." He held his red cheek, anger flashing in his eyes, but after a moment he curved his lips into a mocking smile. "Lily, have you learned to play hard to get now?" I ignored his taunt, suppressing all the emotions roaring within me. Keeping my expression neutral, I asked the housekeeper for a wooden box. Carefully, I placed the remnants of the embroidery inside. As I turned to leave, someone grabbed my shoulder. "It's raining heavily. Where are you going?" Ethan asked. I brushed his hand off, grabbed an umbrella by the door, and walked out into the rain without looking back. Behind me, his low voice called out, "Lily, if you keep this up, I won't take you to France." The housekeeper hesitated before saying, "Young master, shouldn't we?" Ethan cut him off. "Let her make a scene if she wants." Up in the upper levels of the opera house, I stood clutching my skirt, waiting for judgment. The man seated above me was dressed in an elegant black robe, his long slender fingers casually playing with the scraps of my embroidery. His phoenix-like eyes lifted and he said lazily, "Miss Lily, I don't collect garbage." My heart sank to the depths. Clenching the handkerchief in my palm, I discreetly wiped away my tears. Rising, I bowed and said, "I'm sorry to disturb you." Just as I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Bring me a finished phoenix embroidery in 10 days. Startled, I looked up at the faint smile on his lips, then dropped to my knees and kowtowed deeply. For his present help, for the life-saving kindness he had shown me in my past life, and for the grace my father had once extended to him. This was the karma that bound us now. Without delay, I returned to my stitching, working night and day. This time I moved directly into the small abandoned embroidery house. The narrow room had been empty for years. One night, just before I passed out from exhaustion, I heard frantic knocking at the door. When I opened my eyes, the last person I wanted to see was by my side. "Ethan." Frowning, he said, "Where did you run off to? Do you know how long I've been driving around looking for you?" We're flying tomorrow. Stop this nonsense. I was too tired to argue, my voice faint as I replied. Ethan, I'm not going. The air grew thick with silence. He touched my forehead, his voice laced with disbelief. You're delirious with fever. I pushed his hand away. No, I'm not. His gaze dropped to the necklace resting on my chest, and he let out a cold laugh. Lily, don't think I don't know what you're planning. Don't go running to my parents playing the victim. If it weren't for your father saving my mother in that fire. He stopped abruptly, his words left unfinished. I'll never marry you in this lifetime, Ethan said coldly. But as you wish, I'll take you to France. Just behave and stop making trouble. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. The morning of the flight, Ethan arrived at the embroidery house as promised. But the figure he expected to find waiting eagerly was nowhere to be seen. The messy bed on the attic floor suggested that whoever had slept there had left in a hurry. He slammed his fist against a beam, frustration etched into his face. Does she think disappearing like this will make me stay? Lily hasn't changed at all. Still clinging to childish fantasies, refusing to grow up. Leaving the workshop, he instructed the driver, go to the Walker family's old home. She must be there begging my parents to stop me from leaving. At the old house, his mother asked, where's Lily? Why didn't she come with you? Ethan studied his parents' expressions carefully to confirm they weren't lying, then responded lightly, she's sick. She asked me to say goodbye on her behalf. He remained composed until he got back into the car. Once inside, his hands trembled as he opened the suitcase placed in the back seat. It was the luggage Lily had prepared. Inside he found familiar items, a hairpin, a jade pendant, a pocket watch. All gifts he had given her over the years. For a moment he thought she had packed them because she loved him so much she wanted to carry them with her. But upon closer inspection he realized they were only gifts. Not a single piece of her clothing was packed. Ethan's face darkened. Drive to the police station, he ordered. Pull every string necessary. Search every corner. I want her found. The driver hesitated, pale-faced. Sir, your appointment with Miss Sophia is approaching, and the flight is in less than 3 hours. Ethan glanced at his watch, removed his glasses, and massaged his aching temples. After a long silence, he chuckled bitterly. I almost fell for her trick. Isn't this exactly what she wanted? To see me running around frantically looking for her, and miss the flight. He sighed, adjusted his jacket, and said curtly, take me to meet Miss Sophia at the airport. At the airport, Sophia looped her arm through Ethan's and looked up at him with a smile. Ethan, do you remember that little cafe near campus where we first met during our studies abroad? He forced a smile. I remember. He should have felt happy. But as the plane ascended and the city of his youth faded into the distance, it felt as though a part of his heart had been carved away. He clenched his hand over the red birthmark on the back of his hand, recalling the day when Lily's tears had fallen there, leaving a burning sensation that lingered even now. It's all Lily's fault, he thought bitterly. 8 days later, my embroidery stood out among the submissions. Adrian Knight invited me to the upper floors of the Opera House, and when he announced the results, I burst into tears of joy. But exhaustion overtook me and everything spun. When I woke up again, I thanked Adrian before heading to the Walker family's old house. In the grand hall, Ethan's mother dropped her teacup in shock. His father stood glaring at me. Lily, did Ethan mistreat you? If he did, I'll write to him and demand he come back immediately. I shook my head. It's not that. I've come to understand that Ethan and I are not aligned in heart or mind. It's my fault for failing to repay your kindness for raising me these past years, and for entangling myself with him for so long. I didn't want them to know the full extent of the pain and confusion. I had come to terms with it. Ethan was perfect in every way except for one thing. He was never meant to be my husband. That was all. It took days of persuasion before they finally accepted my decision and formally recognized me as their adopted daughter. I couldn't help but wonder what Ethan's reaction would be when he found out I had truly become his sister. Perhaps he would feel relieved. When I received the first letter from Ethan, I had successfully reopened the Walker family embroidery house and had just secured a large order. During dinner, Ethan's mother placed a letter on the table. It bore the embassy seal and was marked as urgent, accompanied by a plane ticket. She took my hand and said, "Lily, Ethan is waiting for you to come." I felt a wave of confusion. Why would Ethan want me to go to him? I didn't open the letter or accept the ticket. "Mother, I'm your daughter now." Her eyes reddened, but she smiled through her tears. "Then let Ethan fend for himself." The next time I saw Ethan was 2 months later. Adrian Knight had quietly invited me upstairs. He had taken off his suit but was still dressed in his opera costume, his long hair cascading down his shoulders as he reclined on a chaise. When he saw me enter, he stood and smiled. "This outfit suits me well, doesn't it?" I was momentarily stunned by his beauty, unable to look away. After a pause, I finally replied, "If you like it, that's what matters." After 3 rounds of drinks, Adrian brought up the business deal I had been negotiating. "That client happens to be a personal acquaintance of mine," he said lightly. I refused him without hesitation. "Adrian, your family's debt to mine was repaid in my past life. Besides, I'm not some sheltered young woman. I grew up learning far too much from my parents." We played chess until late into the evening before I prepared to leave. Adrian walked me to the door. "Lily." Someone called softly. I looked up, startled to see Ethan standing by the street. He held a black umbrella, wearing a pristine white military uniform adorned with gold tassels and a pinned insignia. He looked as though he had rushed here in a hurry, yet I thought he was supposed to be abroad. "When did you become so close with an opera singer?" he asked coldly as he approached, grabbing my wrist. Ethan pulled me into his arms. I pushed him away with unexpected force, causing him to stumble a few steps before regaining his balance. Only then did I notice his bloodshot eyes and the dark circles beneath them. "Watch your boundaries. We have nothing to do with each other anymore," I said. Ethan's expression darkened as his gaze shifted toward Adrian, who was standing calmly under the eaves. "Is it because of him? How long have you two known each other?" Adrian smiled faintly, ignoring him. "Miss Lily, the car is ready." I nodded in thanks, unwilling to argue further with Ethan. But before I could step away, Ethan suddenly shoved me against the car door, his hand grabbing the necklace around my neck. His smile was dark and menacing. "Does he know that the locket you wear so close to your heart contains my picture?" Before I could respond, Adrian stepped forward and pulled Ethan off me. "Mr. Walker," Adrian said evenly, "I've heard of you, but unfortunately, this situation doesn't warrant your interference." "Enough," I interrupted, taking off the necklace and tossing it at Ethan. "I don't need this anymore. Since you gave it to me, I'm returning it to its rightful owner." Ethan hastily picked up the necklace, wiping away the dirt with the sleeve of his white uniform. When he opened the locket, his expression froze. "What is this?" he demanded. "A ticket refund." "You tricked me," he said, his voice trembling. "You never intended to leave with me, did you?" I sighed as the rain fell between us, creating a heavy curtain that separated us physically and emotionally. "There was a time I wanted to," I admitted. "But now I feel no attachment to you." Ethan gripped the necklace tightly, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. His bloodshot eyes were filled with despair. And so we parted ways. After that night in the rain, I poured my heart into expanding the embroidery house, turning it into a tower of success. During the war, I took in widows and taught them embroidery, helping them support their families. The reputation of the Walker family embroidery house grew immensely. One of our embroidered pieces was even chosen as a gift to the British royal family. Over the years, I often read the newspapers, catching glimpses of Ethan standing tall and proud at international conferences, bringing honor to our nation. Each time, I let out a sigh of relief, worried that the butterfly effect caused by my previous life might have altered his fate. I thought our lives had completely diverged, until one late night, a call from the presidential office shattered that belief. The secretary on the other end said, "Mr. Walker was involved in a plane crash and is in critical condition. He's been calling your name repeatedly. We hope you can come immediately." As soon as the call ended, I set out without delay. A government vehicle picked me up at the designated location. When I arrived, the hospital corridor was already filled with people I recognized from newspapers or business events. Inside the room, Ethan was connected to numerous tubes. His neatly combed hair, always perfect in photos, now hung messily across his forehead. When he saw me enter, his dark eyes lit up. "Lily, you came after all." I sat by his bedside, silent for a long time before finally speaking. "Ethan, you have to live. Your parents were just talking about how much they miss you." His chest rose and fell with shallow, strained breaths. Lowering his voice, he asked, "And you, do you miss me?" I avoided his gaze, focusing instead on the heart monitor beside him. Softly I replied, "Ambassador Walker. More than anyone, I hope you survive." Suddenly, Ethan gripped my hand tightly, his strength surprising despite his condition. "I promise you, I will live. Lily, will you come back to see me?" His bloodshot eyes stared at me, pleading. I hesitated, then asked, "Where is Sophia?" Ethan's voice turned cold, as though mentioning someone inconsequential. "Why bring her up? She died in Paris 3 years ago." Even in this lifetime, Sophia's fate hadn't changed. After that, I visited Ethan regularly like clockwork. Through those visits, I learned from his staff that despite his busy schedule, he had been returning to the country once a month for years. Why? I wondered. The responses varied: meetings, inspections, ceremonies. But when I thought of the familiar figure I had once seen outside the embroidery house, disbelief crept in. On the day of his discharge, Ethan had reverted to the charismatic diplomat everyone admired. His personal secretary was fixing his tie as he animatedly described his plans to me. "Lily, let's go to England together. I've already thought about our wedding. I'll even ask the Earl to send a congratulatory letter." "Ethan," I interrupted him gently. "Stop seeking me out." He staggered, the smile on his face collapsing into a straight line. "Why? You care about me, don't you?" I sighed. "Ethan, more than anyone, I want you to live." Sitting down across from him, I told him a story spanning 60 years. Slowly, painfully, I convinced him to believe it. "That was the me from my previous life," I said. "In this life, Lily no longer loves you." Ethan leaned over the coffee table, gripping my arm tightly, his gaze burning into mine. "I don't believe you. I won't let you go." I pushed his hand away gently. "The one who can't let go is you." He staggered back, collapsing onto the sofa, his face ashen, as though he were a man on the brink of death. For days afterward, I couldn't understand why Ethan, who had once been so deeply in love with Sophia, was now so insistent on me in this lifetime. Later, I came to realize something about men like Ethan. Born into privilege, gifted beyond measure, adored everywhere he went. Nothing was ever truly out of reach. Until me. It was the things he couldn't have that became the most precious. He didn't love Sophia. He didn't love me either. He didn't understand that love wasn't about possession, but about the connection of two hearts. After one of my visits, as I walked out of the private hospital where he was being monitored, I found a car waiting outside. A man with a calm, grounded demeanor gently took my cold fingertips into his hands, his eyes filled with indescribable tenderness. "There's hot porridge ready for you in the car," Adrian Knight said softly. I married Adrian Knight, and for 60 years we lived in harmony. We were two instruments in perfect tune. Even in our later years, we would still walk hand in hand through the park. When the mood struck, we would sing old opera tunes together, our voices blending into a melody of the past, two people from an old era holding on to these antiquated joys. When Adrian was diagnosed with throat cancer, my world shattered. One day, as I passed by a VIP ward on the same floor, I overheard a conversation that mentioned a name both familiar and distant. What a pity, even when he's sick, he doesn't have a spouse to accompany him. I heard he never married, not even a child to his name. He was so dazzling in his youth, but now as an old man he's all alone. It's sad, really. Peering into the room, I saw the frail, skeletal figure of Ethan on the hospital bed. My heart, however, felt no ripple, no wave. Later, I heard about Ethan's death through rumors. The circumstances were absurd. A little boy had wandered into his room to watch TV. Annoyed by Ethan's complaints about the noise, the child had impulsively smothered him with a pillow, causing him to suffocate. They said he kept calling my name. "Lily, Lily," until the end. But no one responded. A few days later, a lawyer contacted me. He handed me 2 old necklaces. One was empty, The other contained a photograph from my wedding day. Mr. Walker had no heirs, the lawyer explained. He left his entire estate to you. In Ethan's name, I established a foundation for the preservation of historical and cultural heritage. Yet my heart felt no trace of emotion. After all, the mountains of our past had long separated us, each of us standing on opposite sides of time and destiny. What about you? Have you ever held on to someone who never truly chose you? Tell me in the comments. I read every story. And if you love deep, emotional anime stories like this, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next chapter of Norah Chronicles.